in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Testing, testing, testing. How are we doing? We are live. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And welcome to another episode of Case Closed. Case Closed indeed. And let me see whom else I got here on the panel. Okay, I'm Iko Gammon. I'll be hosting you today on this channel. Solo TV 84 is on the road. Okay, so should I say to my right? To my right on the screen, I got Dr. Thunder. You all know who that is. You all know who that is. But we got Dr. Doug down below, adjusting things. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Doug. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. Yeah, I am unmuted. Good. Dr. Doug. My area of expertise is in music, particularly in the discipline of composition and music theory, and supposedly emerging media. At least that's kind of the program focus of my main professor here in Nebraska. Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, by way of Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska now. Spent a few years in Columbus, Ohio, before heading out to the East Coast, and spent the next 10 years in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. So I was actually in between Washington, D.C. and New York a lot during that 10 years there. So, and then decided to go back to school in my early to mid 40s, and been here ever since. So once we got done, so yeah.
All right. Welcome. I believe this is the first time on the channel. This is the first. Well, it's not the first time you and I have appeared on a panel, but
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, indeed. We were on Dr. Thunder's. We met at the CME,
CME,
Conference of
yep.
Masculine, all that good stuff.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So let's
right.
get right into this. What are we here for today? What are we talking about? Okay, well, it is the beginning of a new year. Okay, 2022. 2021 is gone, fellas. Okay, you got to come up with new memes, new jokes, new rhymes, all that stuff. Okay, no more 2021. Now we got 2022 problems. So this is going to be a year in review, a way of gathering our thoughts. You see, many things changed in 2021. Economically, socially, politically, okay? When it comes to crime, and we all know about the big thing that has been going on since 2020, right? And then the way in which it has been handled and all the things that could be said about that. So we're going to be looking at those things, how it affected our personal lives, who's mad, who's upset, who's out there committing all these crimes. I heard crime is going up. We're going to have to talk to Dr. Doug about that. Why's it got to be Dr. Doug? I don't know. It's he said something about Maryland, and that sounds a little crimey. Anyways,
Right.
So let's begin with the economic aspect. Okay, so there are many things that changed, and I'll pass this over to Dr. Thunder and then to you, Dr. Doug.
Sure,
many
sure.
things changed economically. On the one hand, okay, we have the certain kind of doom and gloom whereby, for example, due to the pandemic, people were given certain handouts. Those are now dwindling. For example, February, people are going to need to start paying back their student loans. Okay, some of the handouts that were given are going away. People started getting
Hmm.
evicted. Okay, if you look at certain numbers, you listen to certain news outlets. Crime, again, the overall number of crime, in terms of, let's say we just focus on violent crime, the total number, absolute figures are not as big as they used to be, but we had a sharp spike.
Hmm.
Okay. Year over year, homicide increased by 30%. This is CDC and FBI numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Hmm.
when it
Hmm.
comes to the economic changes, how has this affected your lives? We can start with the top of the funnel, come down. Like you could talk about your city, you can interpret the big data, you could talk about your city, your organization, your particular job, your neighbors, your family. Did you move? Did you get a better job? Did you come out on top economically? Okay. And who's out there committing these crimes? Anyways, Dr. Thunder and then Dr. Doug.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to be back on Case Closed. This is a different location for the show because, as we was mentioned before, Solo Solomon Jones, so Solo TV 84 is traveling. Um, so he'll be back on the show next week, and we'll keep it moving. We're going to be kind of rotating the show to some different platforms. So let me shout out the super sticker right quick from the Truth 908, and that's a $9.99 super chat.
Shout out to Herman Cain.
All right, and we greatly
The late great Herman Cain, I should say.
we deeply appreciate that. So anyhow, so yeah, so I'm a musician. The way my sort of short bio reads is musician, professor, and social commentator. And in my career path, music was first, and I developed, proficiency at that, which facilitated a professorship, a tenured professorship at a major university. And that tenure also facilitated what it has facilitated in the past, and I'm putting this to test, and that is job security, even if you say things that are not convenient. So we'll see how that holds. So as a musician, and I think people in the service industries, I think they felt the sort of pandemic. They felt it pretty harshly, with little to no reporting on the major news media outlets on the way that this thing was impacting us. So freelance musicians, anyone that sort of the sort of gig economy, as it were, any of those kind of things that required doing things where people were congregating, where there was, where there were, where that was a significant part of a piece of, or whatever the product was. If people congregating was part of that in any stage, it was quite damaging to that. I interviewed quite a few folks on my Conversations with Dr. Thunder series, and had lots of conversations with folks about how 2020 was going to be a landmark year for them, and they had all this stuff booked, and it was even better than before. And then, of course, the bottom dropped out in March, and so folks ended up having to sort of reinvent themselves. And so you saw a lot of folks that weren't really particularly technology savvy try to change themselves into, teaching lessons and things virtually. You had, even in more sort of secure positions like academic positions, you had faculty members that had been delivering content, delivering the educational product a particular way for a long time.
Right.
And people that had been in the academic bubble for 30 years and longer asked to totally change the way that they were delivering their educational content, which is very, very challenging, and I think mixed reviews on the success of that. I think much of what you see in the things that have been reported about the sort of lack of skill and lack of effectiveness that public schools, and I'm talking K through 12, experienced with this sort of thing, doing all remote kind of learning. I think I think that could be said pretty similarly as far as the effectiveness of professors teaching that thing. So how did this stuff affect the revenue, the actual money that's exchanging hands? Well, the tendency was that folks that had money and had security, they got more of it, and people that did not got less of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the tendency. So the folks that they were sort of already kind of going down the technology path, they were able to really make significant progress. Whereas folks that were just getting started, because they were kind of being outmatched by folks with a lot of experience, and because they just didn't have the sort of cash on hand to be able to, improve, their, the marketing of their product, and all of that kind of thing. They just tended to not do very well. And then folks that just were like, you know what, technology is not for me. I'm just going to just keep doing what I was doing before. Obviously, it was very damaging for them. So, really good for folks that that already had money and that were doing well anyhow, and really bad for folks that didn't have any.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, Dr. Doug, you're in the same field, generally speaking, okay? So I'm assuming some of the things that Dr. Thunder said is going to also apply to you, but you can give it you're going to come from a different context as well and choose to remark upon any one of these areas which were mentioned. The economy, generally speaking, but also crime going up, which tends to be attached to that as well. And if you can give specific, examples of people that you may know, right? Because when it comes to businesses that depend on people gathering, okay, we can all talk about this particular restaurant in my neighborhood that shut down, or so on and so forth, what have you. If you had any particulars in terms of your life, your or people around you, right? Because that's one thing because people talk about the numbers a lot, and what we're trying to do here is maybe we can put some flesh to the raw numbers, if you will.
Sure. So yeah, it definitely this is a way to sort of humanize the numbers, definitely. And so one of the things that I've sort of noticed in sort of my space here, particularly where I'm located in Middle America, in Lincoln, Nebraska, is that the economy where congregations were necessary for the economy to thrive, such as restaurants, various types of live music venues where
churches.
Churches. Although as an Orthodox Christian, the music side of that, we're not usually paid, for our services as a choir director, and plus we don't have like an instrumental music program in our church. That's usually for Catholics and Protestants and everybody else in between. So I wasn't really a part of that as much. Here and there, I would do gigs here and there, but not so much as some folks who are a little more 3/4 to full time. I wasn't so much a part of that. The other thing is the gig economy was a little different for me because I was a student at the time. I was a full-time grad student at the time. So I wasn't really in the workforce. And as a sole, in that sole capacity of just working, I did do gigs here and there, but once the pandemic started, I was in school. I also had a manufacturing job that I was working at the time, which was
Mhm.
affected very little. The pandemic had very little effect on manufacturing because things still had to be made, things still had to be sort of delivered for the sake of online shopping
Mhm.
and online consumption. So there wasn't
Mhm.
a huge squeeze. In fact, in my case, on the labor side of things, I found an uptick in opportunity that I was constantly turning down a lot of hours because I just couldn't take them. I couldn't take the immense amount of overtime because of school because I was still full time. And so I still had a bit of coursework to do, as well as a bit of teaching to do for the department when I was called to do so. And that was going to be a few times here and there. Now that did shorten a little bit because they had to start amending contracts of some of the professors, even the tenured professors. And so in that, they had to, they had to scale back certain activities while ramping up other activities. And so some of those professors had to be pivoted and positioned in other areas. So for those of us who were either adjunct or grad assistants, we just had to sort of step back. And so the focus at that point became more academic as opposed to some of the work
Mhm.
we had to do for the department. The other thing was that uh, I did have to make a switch because I was also teaching part time at another university that was a few miles west of University of Nebraska, and so with that, I had to. We had a lot of days that, even though our campus was still open, we did have a lot of days due to the weather that we just could not make it happen. So we did a lot of social distancing and other types of mitigation that was suggested by the CDC, and that allowed us to sort of keep our doors open on campus. So the university that I worked at wasn't so much affected by its presence on campus due to the pandemic because of some of those mitigation strategies that they made sure that they implemented. So it was a little bit different here. However,
How about crime? How about crime, Doctor
uh,
Doug? Did
so,
you?
so it's a little different here. It's a little different here. Crime is not as bad as it was in the DC area. There was a bit of an uptick of crime, especially in the public transportation system. The subways experienced an uptick of crime, so there would be a small scale violence to large scale violence, give or take whatever neighborhood you were crossing on the subway. So I would read about those kinds of things. But out here, um, you know, see, an armed society is a polite society. I really believe that. And here in Lincoln, we are kind of an armed society. And so you don't really find a lot of people bothering and trying to rob people. Deeder theft might be an issue here and there, but that's usually just somebody breaking in your car and stealing small things. But in terms of just getting like things like armed robbery, that happens, but it's not to the degree that, in my observation here, like say in Detroit or Chicago. We're starting to get some of that element moving here. We're just starting to sort of ramp up some things here and there. But for the most part, um, you know, folks moving here from parts of the country that that are known for certain types of activity, it doesn't go very far here because a lot of people just don't respond the way that you think they would respond to violence. I mean, again, I work with several people who are concealed carry individuals, and so they're just not out here getting robbed like that. They're not lunch meat. These guys aren't like dinner and lunch for somebody to just go and pick off. So you might want to think a little bit twice about trying to rob somebody here in Lincoln, because you might not know what you might get on the other side of that. So here it's a little bit different. Again, there have been some elements of that. I remember during some of the nationwide uprisings and riots We did have some businesses that were destroyed. We have a faction of Antifa that's here, uh, but the thing is that they tended to stay away from destroying a lot of areas a little further in the neighborhoods. They just concentrated in certain shopping areas because the likelihood of somebody actually arming themselves to go in those areas was a little bit lower than, say, like in the neighborhood areas where there might be some public buildings that you could destroy or some businesses that you could destroy. The rib shack didn't have anything to worry about. Nobody was going to break in there and start stealing ribs out of there because the owner might show up with a shotgun, and he'd be totally justified if he put two in you.
But he could. But could you come in and rob one rib? Could you just get one rib?
He might get, you know what? People in Nebraska are very nice, so he might just give you one rib and just be like,
"Oh, right."
Be like, "Here, man, take a rib, get the hell on fire, doing you." So it's like that. But we did have a venue that was starting to ramp up its business really well, and it was a French. The two owners was a husband and wife French chef team. Called Chez Sodo, and was a great place. Had good live music. One of our professors used to host a Monday night jam there, and a lot of the students would show up. And so during the pandemic, that just totally crushed them. It totally crushed them. They were caterers, so they just ended up closing that business and going back into the catering field. Now it's funny because they ended up doing really well on the catering side because they would get a lot of orders for catering because a lot of people would still have the need to order food, so they would. So it was like business as usual, but to keep the venue and the restaurant open, that was hit really.
Yeah, I've noticed, just to chime in real quick, and then I can keep us moving here.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I have noticed zero difference as far as crime, and part of the reason is that I don't hang out late at night. When they said that there were going to be protests, or if something looked like it could potentially turn into a riot, I was not over there. I live in the suburbs. I sent my son goes to a private school, and so I've kind of insulated myself from a lot of that kind of stuff. And even the gigs that I've had, which were late night, I always have the same sort of code. I'm not in the club when I'm playing nightclubs and stuff like that. I'm not there to hang. I'm there to work.
Right.
Then as soon as I'm done working, I go home.
That's facts. That's actually facts. I've known you for 20 years, and it's funny because I'm the complete opposite. I'm all about the hang. I'll stay there for another hour or two socializing with people. Every time he and I have ever done a gig with each other, it's like within about 20 minutes of packing up and he's like, "Hey, where's Dr. Thunder?" "Oh, he's gone." He's home.
No, I get the bread, I hide it, I get in the car, and I go straight home. I ain't hanging around. I ain't flashing the money. None of that. Just get it happening.
Yeah.
Got it. So it seems so far, two things are on the table. Number one, that it's a mixed bag in terms of certain things shifted, certain things changed, but it was more like a wash from what you're saying, Dr. Doug. And you had to even push back certain opportunities. Like you were getting more and more of certain kinds of opportunities, right?
Right.
And you're over there in Nebraska, and the whole polite thing and the arm thing is going on. So you didn't notice quite an uptick in that particular regard. And also, I should add that on that crime thing, it's not something necessarily that one would notice. I've been just trying to fish to see if there is somebody.
Sure.
Maybe Game Changer is going to tell us about Oakland.
Visible. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Game Changer is going to tell us about what he sees. I don't know. I don't know if you I don't think you don't live in Oakland, but
No,
you
I don't. I have
may
family
roll
there,
through there.
no one has reported, any more crime. There's been, because my grandmother lives there. There's been so many measures, that were put into place in order to, make the elderly feel secure, that it probably was safer, because they're not out at night. They had designated hours for the stores, to open just so the elderly can go and not with everyone else. It might have been safer. I didn't read the statistics on it or anything like that, but it might have been, just a safer experience.
Okay, so Game Changer, let me give you the broader question here about the economy. So this is a year in review, okay? And we're starting out with the economic trends, things that changed, okay? We heard about the great resignation, right? Over 2 million people quitting their job in April of this year or something like that. And then people changing cities, people moving or changing jobs, people not having the handouts that they were given last as long or go as far as they thought. Things are dwindling. The handout part is drying up. Students have to start repaying their student loans again not students, people who owe the loans, right? Have to start repaying their loans back again in February and all these other kinds of things. So what, if in any way, or how did any of this affect you? Basically, you can talk about your organization, your neighbors, your life. Did you come out on top? Dr. Thunder has already told us that, hey, as it tends to be the case, the people who had more money got more money. Okay, that's just the rule of the world. And then the people who had less are getting less. But what, in your neck of the woods, in your experience, in your life, how did this particular set of trends manifest themselves, if you will? And any comments on it?
No, it didn't really have much change. I was already working from home partially. I would have to go in maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks. During 2020 and a large portion of 2021, I didn't have to go in at all. So that gave me a little bit more time to, develop the YouTube thing that you all see now. Outside of that, my day to day wasn't really impacted too much. I was getting paid a little bit more and doing a little bit less work. Let's see. As far as how the wealthy getting wealthier, of course, as you say, that's the rule of law. But I want to challenge the notion that the um, the poor was getting poorer. I think that there were more provisions available to them, to somebody who was, say, receiving unemployment or something like that, or someone who was receiving food stamps or welfare. I think that they gave more provisions unjustly. Well, I shouldn't say unjustly, but to people who may have abused the system more during the pandemic than they did before the pandemic.
Oh, most
uh,
definitely. And a lot of these people are getting ready to go to jail real soon. PPP loan scams and SBA
mhm.
loan scams. Oh yeah, we about to see a lot of cats go to jail real soon. Yep, real soon.
So
Yeah, in my mention of the poor folks getting poorer. See, so uh, so we know that the arts tend to be quite liberal politically. The folks that control things and the people that are artists tend to be a little bit more left leaning. And it's a funny thing because let's talk about jazz in particular. There is this sort of 1% thing that happens in jazz, just like
Oh,
the thing that
yeah.
many folks complain about. The liberals tend to complain about saying how it's
Yeah.
unfair, but when you actually give them the control of who makes it and who doesn't
It's
in the
worse.
entire infrastructure,
It's worse.
it is even worse.
It's worse. It's
It's
way
even
worse.
worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
so
like for
for
now.
instance, yeah. So like in jazz, it's the
Mhm.
same thing. I mean, you have certain artists that are getting all of the gigs and making out like bandits, where you have again a huge percentage of folks that are starving artists that
Mhm.
can't hardly make any bread, and it doesn't seem to be it's not related to skill, right? It's not like if you're
Mhm.
more skilled, then therefore you'll have better opportunities. No, it's not that at all. It's who you know. So they do all of the crony stuff, all of the crony capitalism stuff that they complain about. They tend to promote that stuff when they're in control of the entire structure.
Mhm.
That was more of
Hmm.
what I was mentioning. I was speaking of, and of course, Game Changer. I would agree that there's a lot of opportunities for folks that don't have, to be shored up, as it were. Now that's about to end, but at least through this time period, it's been the
Right.
case.
True.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it already has ended. At least here in California, it's ended for a lot of
Mm.
people.
Mm.
I think the student loan thing is probably the last portion to end, but I think
Right.
Hmm.
everything, like all the other all of the other things that were given to sustain people were had ended. And yeah, I could see why it created like more competition in social venues for artists. I definitely see
Right.
that. I was thinking more like I was thinking more like people who may, someone who works seasonally, they work one
Sure.
season, maybe in agriculture or something like that, and then
Sure.
they're off or they're looking for work during the
Hmm.
rest of the time. I think that having prolonged provisions, because those people, what they do is they work their secure job, their secure seasonal job, or
Hmm.
maybe it's not agriculture, maybe they're a cameraman on the show, but they're
Hmm.
contractors or whatnot. So there's a gap in employment in their occupation. Those people receive prolonged unemployment and prolonged provisions, as a result of this, and perhaps had time to master their craft or learn another craft or get into um,
Hmm.
like the gentleman said before, complete their masters, or what have you.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. You want to give a quick shout out to
go for it.
let's give a quick shout out to Gail. Go ahead and give us a sound effect, Doctor
Yeah.
Thunder,
Shout
if
out to
you
Gail.
may.
Oh, here it is.
There it is.
All right, thank you,
Give it
thank
a
you, thank
battle
you very
rap
much for the
shout out.
$5 super chat. Says shout out to Ike and the panelists, and shout out to you, Gail, always holding
Yeah.
it down out here in these YouTube streets, moderating for all them channels. And you also have your channel yourself, right? Uh,
That's right.
Gail at Night, I believe.
Hmm.
So make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe. I've already done so. Subscribe to Gail. She
Yeah.
she does good work out here. Now, if we continue with
Hmm.
this economic conversation here, and
Hmm.
maybe we'll start leaning into the social aspect of things. There's
Sure.
some people whom say that the different things, the different trends that we're seeing, are going to leave a sustained mark. Now, this is just one particular thread of thought. It's not particularly deep. Just saying that, okay, well, people now are going to get used to a certain kind of, shall we say, um, in other words, the bar has been lowered. Okay, now the
Hmm.
bar is, you drive Uber and you stay in your mom's basement. And if hey, what's wrong with that? All my friends are doing it, right? First of all,
Hmm.
do you believe, because the opposite, maybe this obviously a self-selective group of people, right? But
Mm.
I'm hearing total opposite from here. I'm hearing people saying, "Hey, I had the opportunity to do this. I was pushing back on certain opportunities." For me, for example, if I give some examples in my life, one of the things that was affected was my ability to travel. Right, so I couldn't really travel as much
Sure.
in up and down the West Coast to Seattle and Portland and all that kind of stuff
Hmm. Hmm.
for selling and closing deals and whatnot. So I had to
Yeah.
find other ways to do it. Um,
Hmm.
and this was mainly because of the, shall we say, rules of the clients, right? They were
Hmm.
not in the meeting. They couldn't have these boardrooms where people could, all that kind of stuff, right? You can't have these board meetings with these people anymore. So I had to
Hmm.
figure out other ways. So there was a little lull there for a couple of months for me to figure out the new way, and then boom, it kind of skyrocketed. So overall, came out on top. Okay, so slightly moving out to the social aspect of things. Two things on the table. Number one, people not having the ability to, shall we say, congregate as much. Okay,
Hmm.
they're saying that this is going to affect a lot of people. Now, this may not be you, but it may be. Let's say you can look at the children. How about the kids? The children. Uh, how is it affecting them? And then there's that other aspect, the economic aspect, where people are saying, "Oh, you know what? This is really going to change the outlet. The idea of upward mobility in the United States." Do you think that's all BS, or do you think there are actually people who are out there now just kind of setting a lower bar for themselves? Let's start with Dr. Thunder and then Dr. Doug, and then Game Changer. Again, the social aspect in terms of social congregation and things like that. Thoughts about it, how it affects you. And then number two, economic aspect as far as people's expectations.
Yeah, I think that uh, folks' expectations. Uh, yeah, it's kind of mixed, uh, and it seems to depend on. Uh, I don't know, maybe a political philosophy that the person follows. So I think you hear a lot of complaining from a certain segment, a certain sort of left leaning kind of crowd, uh, that I haven't heard as much from more right leaning folks. It seems like the more right leaning folks seem to complain more about, this sort of uh, the more power that the government is sort of claiming for themselves, that we know that they will never give back. There seems to be more complaining about that, but less complaining about actual like opportunities or jobs or whatever. Because I think the whole kind of self-reliant thing sort of makes you say, okay, this is what the circumstances are. These are the parameters I have to deal with. Okay, I'll just figure out how to make it work. And you had a lot of people, reinvent themselves. So now it was always my plan to do an interview series, but because of when the pandemic occurred and in process, I had just completed my doctorate, and so I had remarketed all my stuff with the Dr. Thunder thing. So yes, I actually have a doctorate. It's not just a clever sort of screen name, as it were. But I redid all my stuff in drthundermusic.com. I changed the name of my quartet to Dr. Thunder Quartet. But then also, and I was like, okay, well, there's no gigs, and all the folks that I would like to, get in nice conversations, they're all available now. I'm most heavily networked with musicians. And so I was able to get really great interviews right from the beginning of my interview series. And I just did episode 182 of that, right? So I think a lot of folks took this as an opportunity rather than sort of just looking at it as a negative kind of thing. I think also another way that people maybe orient differently around sort of being sequestered, quarantined, is that if you tended to be more of an introverted kind of person, I think it was all of the folks that I've interviewed and have conversations with, they have tended to see this almost as a positive thing, where they were able to double down in certain things and really make things work and speed things up for themselves. Whereas folks that are more extroverted, they are tending to have more issues and having a problem, especially with the sort of social, social sequestering, the segregation, the keeping people away from each other, that whole thing. So I think a lot of that is kind of interesting.
How did it affect the kids?
Yeah, and I've got an 8-year-old. I'll tell you, this is one thing that maybe the thing that I like the least about. And there's a lot of stuff not to like about it, by the way. But maybe the thing I like the least about this whole thing is just my son's orientation around being masked or not.
Yeah.
We sat down for New Year's dinner, and something that he said in his prayer, I mean, his prayer was all about COVID and people being healthy and not getting COVID and stuff like this. And this is an 8-year-old, and this kind of stuff is kind of at the forefront of his mind, because everywhere we go, it's like, is this store one that you don't have to wear a mask in, or do you have to wear a mask? Okay, I guess I have to wear one in here. We went to church this morning, and I'm a musician in church, so he sits with us when the band is playing. It's black church, right? So this is a great way to train young folks and to see if they're going to be interested in music, is to have them sit with the band. So he's sitting with the band, so he gets to see all this stuff up close, and he's sitting back where the drummer is. And and then we go and we sit in the congregation during the sermon, this kind of thing. And the thing is that, having a mask on all the time, going to school, have to have the mask on. He's got certain times where he can take a break from having it on. He's got to have multiple masks. I mean, my wife has this big dish of like masks that have been washed. She's got this rotation, of masks and stuff. So it's just like all of that kind of stuff. And that stuff doesn't seem like that's the kind of stuff that kids should be, that shouldn't be occupying any of his bandwidth. That should be zero of his bandwidth.
Yep.
And so I really hate that is, a big part of what's going on. Now he goes to a private school, and before the school that he's in now, he was in another private school. He did pre-K for 2 years, and then he did kindergarten at a private school that's associated with like Lutheran, and then he did first grade, and now he's going to second grade at a Catholic school. And so it's like they were able to manage and navigate this whole thing, I think, much better than what you see in the public schools. So in the public schools, they went to like only a couple days a week, or long periods of time with kids are not in class, or everything's virtual. They went to that kind of stuff. Whereas at the private school that he's at, there's been some periods of time where students weren't in session, and they gave parents the option of having their students not have to be in the classroom, so they could do it remotely if they wanted to, especially for last year, last school year. But now it's like, but he's been in school the whole time. So a lot of parents that are complaining about how their kids have not been in school. My son has been in school the whole time.
Yeah.
So Dr. Doug.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Thunder has put a lot on the table there. First about kids,
Yeah.
talked about the fact that, hey, introvert versus extrovert kind of a deal. And then saying, hey, when it comes to expectations, it depends on where you were already at. If you were the one that's going to be likely to complain about things, then. So how do you address this thing in terms of the social aspect, and also in terms of people's expectations out there? Or do you have any kind of feeling for people just now only doing the bare minimum? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I know that personally, I could easily revert back to wanting to do the bare minimum. And so I almost have a certain level of disdain for that. So I tend to have a little less compassion for folks, including myself, that want to revert back to being that way. And so for me, the pandemic seemed like it should have been one of those things that almost forced people to sort of get a little more assertive about whatever it is that they are trying to do, and even reinventing themselves. The reinventing oneself is one thing that I found to be something that's very necessary, and a lot of people were able to deal with this, whether it meant just developing other skills and other lines of work, or staying in the field that they're in, but finding other ways and approaches to getting sort of the activities associated with that field, to getting those activities to be expressed virtually, or in some sort of real way that didn't involve congregating, because at that point we sort of saw what the government was doing and suggesting in terms of congregating, which is funny because the same folks that were suggesting us not to congregate were the same people who were struggling themselves with congregating, or not using the mitigation strategies correctly. So we had all this talk about how to use mitigation strategies during this time if you had to congregate and you just couldn't stay home. But at the same time, people still, they weren't 6 feet apart. It'd be the same people that are getting on people for not staying 6 feet apart, or people wearing masks. And so then they go through this whole instruction and tutorial on how to wear the mask, and then you get up there and during during the exchange from one president to the next, you see even the president himself that was pushing the mask during the campaign didn't even he was never wearing the mask, or it was down all, you know, it was off his nose, or he just take it
Yep.
off.
Yep.
So he wear the mask, and then once he goes to the mic to speak, he just rips it off his face. And it's like that really did something, you know.
Or cats like walking around with the mask on their chin.
or they walk around with it on the chin. So then
And like nobody will say anything to them.
and no one
They
will
have
say
it on their
anything.
chin. But if you don't have a mask on, they'll talk to you.
Right,
But
right.
if you
Then they
have it
wanna
on
come
your
up to
chin,
you. Do you care about others other than yourself? And here's the kicker about that. The mask, because like these kinds of folks, I even had a professor here that was railing about this. And you know, with the mask, you know, you're walking around and giving giving this, you know, that and the other. And my thing is that the mask actually were for people who actually knew they had it. That's what the masks were for. It wasn't for just people who like didn't have it, and so you just want to make sure. It is really for people who actually had it. It's just like the all the information about vaccines and all that stuff. Like cats they just get it wrong. And look, I'm all about sharing what mitigation strategies we should take to try to protect ourselves a little bit better from everything, not just DVOC 9-1, but just everything. And so it's. And so I don't mind people trying to implore you, but at the same time, you'll get cats that'll be walking with a mask hanging down their face, literally arguing people, starting arguments with people who don't have one present, and just railing against them. And I remember watching a few videos where the person that didn't have one was saying, "Look, you don't even have yours on." Well, that's just because I'm taking a break. And it's like, well, I could be taking a break, but I just decided to take the damn thing off.
or how about these restaurant policies where you have to have the mask on when you walk in the restaurant, when you when you get seated and like that. But as soon as you sit down, you can take that joint off, or as long as you. And it's like.
Like,
like what is it? What you tell me if the virus knows the difference between if you're in transit or if you're seated getting ready to eat.
You know, and see, I could forgive all of that if cats would just say it. If they would just be like, "Look, I hate this crap just as much as you do, but I'm going to try X, Y, and Z just because I'm afraid." Just say that I'm afraid. I would say something else and just call you the C word, but just say I'm afraid. But I would have more respect for that to just say that I'm afraid, because now what we've done is we built up a nation of cowards, and cowardice is becoming the new virtue. And that right there, I can't deal with. Not here, not in this country. I cannot deal with that, and I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And it's been something that has won. It's actually won the day. I would even dare say it's one of the reasons why certain elected officials are actually elected, because of cowardice. And cowardice cannot be the new virtue. It just can't. You see what road that leads a country down, and it's not a good one. And it's a very dark path. So, yeah. And you know, the other social ramifications, like with the kids, like Dr. Thunder was saying, most of the public school students, even here, and we actually have a pretty solid public school system here in Lincoln, but they were having a lot of trouble with student performance. This is a big deal concerning standardized tests that some of the schools have to take because they are not going to be prepared. This is a big troublesome issue with the public schools. The more of the private schools and more of the schools that have a little more freedom of choice, like the homeschool system, or some of the more independent schools, like more of your African-based schools or your more Jewish day schools and things like that. More of those schools, they virtually have been in school and in class the whole time, because they did have those times where they could have certain days of the week that they can do remote and virtual educational courses and their assignments and things like that.
And somehow almost no issues with like what are they super spreading?
Yeah, no,
like
spike,
no issues.
Harley. Yeah. It's and if it is, it's very short lived. because usually a lot of the kids' immune systems are pretty strong, and so they get over it. They get over it pretty quick. It's only been a few kids that have actually died, and shout out to them and God rest their soul. May they pray for us. May they continue to pray to God for us. But it's like one of those things where just because something happens to the rare few, now we have to start developing some sort of policy or strategy to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone. And that's just not realistic. And not only that, but then you're making everyone else pay for that. And it's not a good, literally pay for it as well as socially pay for it, which is not good for a lot of the kids. Yeah.
So that right there, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to get your thoughts on this game changer.
Mm-hmm.
If we start with the idea of, because what was on the table was the social thing. The social thing strains on relationships, introvert, extrovert kids, and then also the lowering of expectations economically. Okay, and then added into it was obviously, what is the cause of the majority of all these trends is, the 91 DVOC, right? And then Dr. Doug just mentioned something about the numbers, right? I did a stream a couple of weeks ago about the numbers, okay? And we talked about how many people have died in Nigeria, for example. And then we looked at the age range of the people that are dying, right? And we all know where it tends to skew numbers wise in terms of the age. And then if you look at the Nigeria, I think has close to like 260 million people. So it's not a small country. And I don't want to say the number now, but it was very insignificant number of people who died from 91 DVOC versus all the other things. But if you look at all the immigration policies and the testing and the this and the that and the canceled flights, you would think this was not done for Ebola, okay?
No,
Ebola, remember all the scare about Ebola and all that kind of stuff?
Ebola
People,
was frightening. Ebola
Ebola
was
was
freaking
actually
frightening. It was
frightening, but
really frightening. You
there
did
was not
not
this
want that.
whole massive
Yeah.
uniform, shall we say, front, shall we say, response to it.
Oh,
So
sure. They
game
tried to
changer.
get rid of responding to it as quick as it came on the scene.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Responses to this, first of all, the numbers thing. The numbers thing doesn't seem to make sense on its face, right? The percentage of people dying, people talk about the fact that, okay, well, it spreads exponentially, but just because it's a small number, it's still exponential, as in, 1, 2, 4, 8, it's still exponential, but even though it's not millions yet, but at some point, things tend to peter out, viruses tend to, shall we say, okay, here's what viruses are generally here to do. They're not here to kill the host and then kill themselves, right? So generally speaking, as they mutate, they'll find a right kind of balance where they're not killing too much of you. That's kind of how that way they can kind of hang around, generally speaking. But anyways, game changer, okay? On the numbers, on the logic of the way Dr. Doug put it, people paying for both economically and socially, just for the few. And then you can talk about the fact of strains in relationship, how that has affected you, and then the whole economic thing in terms of people maybe just accepting some base level, shall we say, the bare minimum. Any thoughts on all these things, sir? You there, game changer?
Apologies, I was muted. But yes, you're right about the number of people that suffered. It is insignificant. Now, one could argue that that insignificant amount is due to the measures that were put into place. Even though it had an economic impact, one can say that hey, if we didn't do this, that insignificant amount would have been significant. Personally, I don't think so, and this is just anecdotally, just knowing people who has had the who's had COVID and survived. It does seem as though it has a very low mortality rate. With people who were not, who didn't previously have, conditions. That being said, I think that it's a political move, the economic changes in policies that were put into place in order to secure society. You see, it only takes one from a how can I say from a voter standpoint in order to impact a large group of voters. I mean, if this disease, if something could have been done to prevent, say, grandma's death, and it wasn't done, then all the grandkids and kids and great grandkids are going to vote against a politician that didn't do everything they can, that didn't say, hey, over 65 gets to go into the store before 10 and everybody else has to wait outside, like. So I think it's more political than anything. And it's not how many people are impacted, it's who's impacted. So I think
Hmm.
that's why they did what they did. But you're right.
It
I
makes
mean,
sense. And then before you go into the rest of the stuff, because there's the economic stuff and then the social stuff and the rest of that, just wanted to kind of say that the economic thing, there is one aspect of, let's say, in democracies, whom the voters tend to be, right? If you got the AARP in your pocket, that's a significant chunk in terms of actual voters. Because
Mhm.
yeah, sure, you can get a bunch of 18-year-olds on your side, but they're not going to the polls. But those AARP people, they're voting. Okay, now
yeah,
that's one thing. But the other thing is this: this is the time, and you could just look back in terms of how old Trump is, and how old Joe Biden is. Those are like the now, generally speaking, okay, because we've had some other old presidents, but this is not the norm. Okay,
Mhm.
in terms of leadership, look at CEOs, C suites, and again the presidents and such. The boomers just don't want to go away. It seems like this is the old. Not seems like, that's wrong. This is the oldest group of leadership that we've ever had in this country, and you can Google it, you can check it, you can look at the people
Mhm.
running for president, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Old people, okay, that just don't seem to want to give way. And then there's this big gap, like I believe it's Generation X after them or something, like whatever it is, the people who should be there
Mhm.
right now, where it's just not happening. Okay,
Yeah.
these people have not taken on the leadership yet. It's still boomers everywhere. Okay, so in addition to the fact that they're voters, they're also actually in power. But anyways,
Mhm.
continue, game changer, with the rest of your response to the economic aspect and also the social stuff. Has this caused strain in your relationships? If you found it difficult in terms of the quarantine, whatnot? You muted again?
so we're moving to the social aspect of the relationship now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, social, and also the economic stuff in terms of people not pushing themselves for more and just accepting bare minimum because that's what everybody else seems to be accepting.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it would seem like couples that don't live together would spend more time together because they're working from home and things like that. That wasn't the case with me, for whatever reason. It seems as though it developed more comfort in using technology to communicate with her. Um, I don't know why. Like, and actually, when it first started, there was all these jokes about it. Like, I have to stay at home with my girlfriend, or I have to stay at home with my wife more often, and how much it's going to be a pain or a strain on a relationship. That wasn't my story, and I kind of thought that it would be, but it just didn't turn out that way.
Hmm. Okay. So it just ended up being a technology thing. But then again, you guys seems like you weren't living with this person, right?
No, we're not living together, and it could be that her work, she's a hairdresser, so it could be that she
Is she
went from.
African?
Yes. Yeah,
Go
she's
ahead.
from she's not from your country, but she's close, she's Cameroonian.
Yeah.
So she's a
Wow.
hairdresser. Why you say that? Like, a lot of them do hair or something?
It's a hair thing, yeah.
Yeah, so instead of her working in shop at set hours, she would deal with clients on a one-on-one basis at their convenience. So maybe that's why it impacted it in that way, or maybe we just couldn't get scheduling right.
And in your circles, probably not this, this is not what you're seeing in your circles, but the whole did you and also so there are two things here. Do you think there's any merit to the argument? Because somebody could always say, hey, this particular ripple or this particular pebble I drop in the ocean is going to cause a ripple. And yes, it is true. Okay. But it doesn't matter compared to all the other things that is affecting the ocean. So somebody would say, hey, this particular the economic trends right now is going to cause massive social changes, and it's going to change the whole of the tapestry of American future, and people in their basements and this and that and the other, right? Again, it might be just a pebble in the ocean. Yes, ripples will happen, but don't matter. Or it might be a big meteor in the ocean, right? So, what are your thoughts as far as that? And do you see anything anecdotally to this effect in terms of people now just chilling and being comfortable with the bare minimum? Game changer.
I don't. I mean, it may stimulate the emerging gig economy, and the mindset behind it. People working from home, looking for alternative ways to make money. People looking for passive income. I think that's just the trend of the Western society, and I think that it may hyper accelerate that. I think it also may. Companies are getting used to the idea of, not having to pay for workspace and have people work from home whenever they can. So I think that it'll affect it in that way. But as far as so I liken it to the social as I think that it's kind of like we're in a war without the actual war, without people off somewhere fighting and dying. So if you look at our America's past wars, they almost always, with the exception of the Revolution and Civil War, were fought abroad, and there was a socioeconomic impact for the people left behind. We're in a situation where there's a socioeconomic impact for the people here without actually a war. So I think that this is just this generation's event, that that defines us, and it's not as traumatic as some of the past events that Americans have suffered through. I know,
Mhm.
like that you're not American, but yet and still the history.
Indeed. So, human societies are similar, generally speaking, insofar as they're composed of human beings. And insofar as they are agricultural, so they have they're we're not nomadic. We have a land base, and populations get big, and we're human beings, so there's going to be certain things going on. And this brings back to mind something you said, Dr. Thunder, about your son. Now, this is your son, and this is right now, and this is DVOC 91. So there is a particularity to it that bears, shall we say, focusing on and talking about. However, there is another side, which is, well, if it's not DVOC, then it's another thing, right? It's going to be something. How about the people who grew up in New York during 9/11? Or how about the right? So there always is that thing of there's something that's going to be going on, and the kids are going to be focusing on that thing. And while it is in an autobiographical way, it is very important which particular event it was. But then you bring out the next book from the other decade, and it's somebody else's chapter about some other thing, right? That kind of a thing. So I guess the let's go one more round with this to say, because it's a perfect segue from what Game Changer just said, which is, hey, another cycle. This just looks like some other kind of a war, but different. Now, here's something about war, by the way. War is everything about war is great, except for the killing, right? That's like the only part that is kind of like, if it wasn't for the killing, everything. Yep, let me give you one example. We all know about the mobilization one, right? Uh, you're gonna go to the moon because you're competing, war competition. Let's put it that way,
Sure.
right? You can economic warfare. The Olympics. Maybe that's not war, but we get the spirit of competition that tends to drive human beings. Okay, you have a lot of technological breakthroughs come from the military, right?
True.
So there's something about you that motivates us when the life and death and God, mother, and country, whatever, gets put on the fore. That's just, yeah. So that's great about war. Another thing too is that war tends to cleanse out, especially when it's big enough. It tends to put to rest certain kinds of orders, which would otherwise just become calcified. In other words, rules, regulations, political systems, laws that just kind of just go on and on and on and gather and gather and gather, become cancerous. wars tend to wipe the slate clean. Whether it be as big as something as World War II, where now Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin are going to sit down and say, okay, well, how are we going to rewrite this thing, right? That's on the big end. But even on the smaller end, these kinds of shakeups are good for us in terms of innovation, in terms of, you get the example. But anyways, can we go around with regarding our thoughts on how significant is this? Or is this just one of those things that, given the 24-hour news cycle, which has now become a more than 24 hour, it's now a super cycle of internet coverage and memes and everything, whereby, and also the international perspective that we have, whereby things now seem bigger than they are. This is a proposition, a hypothesis, you know. What are your thoughts with regards to that? Is this as big a, okay, it is, or is it just another little bit of, a little bump on the road that is gonna, shall we say, lead to mainly positive outcomes, as we seem to have been saying on this panel?
Well, I think that it's going to be a very small bump in the road when compared to the catastrophic events that we were talking about. I was just using war as a comparison to the, socioeconomic impact. For example, during World War II, Ford, and I don't know if Chevy was even around then, but Ford was forced to make military equipment and not allowed to make automobiles. So that would be,
Right.
that's, yeah. So things like that, like drastic changes and measures like that. Like they were taking aluminum out of things, they were taking metals out of things that normally packaging and things like that would normally contain metal because it went to the war effort. People in Europe, had drills and things like that to go to bomb shelters, and I mean, of course, they had a more significant impact. And these were kids that were made to do such things. So as far as I do think that the social impact is similar, but not to the extent. No, and it could be maybe you answered your question with that, Ike. That because there are significant side effects, positive side effects of this. Maybe the leading bodies wanted to create a war without killing, and hoping that there would be some of the positive side effects. Maybe we will put somebody on Mars as a result of this.
This is that's a good point, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Doug, and we'll wind up with Dr. Thunder. The whole
Sure.
war without killing thing. This is kind of like, if somebody was trying to get that going, and they sat down and twiddled, twisted their little
Yeah.
mustache and say, how can we get some positive effects, motivate people, mobilize industries and such, and cause some innovation? This may be an overall positive. Anyways, Dr. Doug, what you have
Yeah.
to say with regards to, shall we say, is this a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Are we going to see a net positive? And maybe get conspiratorial a little bit about, maybe this is somebody's planning this for their own benefit.
I think that could be a bit of most of those things. I think that you touched on the space race a bit between the U.S. and Russia, which was very interesting because we initially kind of lost initially because they had already beat us
Sputnik.
to some of the technological efforts to being able to go into space. But then we were coming back. We were coming behind them, sort of refining that and sort of expressing almost a slicker style or a slicker approach to being able to get our astronauts to the moon and then back, instead of just around the outer atmosphere of the Earth. We were actually able to go to the moon, come back, bring these people back safely. We had a protocol for once the capsules landed in the ocean, in terms of popping the hatches and so on and so forth, to make sure that we got to the astronauts in time. So we kind of had a standard protocol, and it was a military effort because the astronauts were military men. They were pilots. That was the whole notion of the right stuff crew. And so it's funny that you mentioned throughout that a lot of our innovative efforts in society and civil society come from a lot of military efforts for a specific purpose. It's just like touchscreen technology. That was like an R&D that was an R&D approach that was dealt with that ended up making its way to Apple as well as Windows technological advances in their.
Windows first.
I say again. Say again.
Windows first.
Yeah. Windows versus. Yeah, and so yeah, there is that. I love watching a lot of sci-fi that sort of center around this notion of uh, using less human to human contact in war efforts. So that means less killing and more killing of the technology if there is going to be any killing. This is the whole. This is one of the strategies behind drone technology, using drones. Now, drones are actually killing people, but the idea is to send less boots on the ground into volatile situations where you start putting their safety at risk and things like that. And so what that ends up doing is taking a lot of the military men, especially from living in DC. You get to know a lot of military personnel really well, and a lot of those boots on the ground. I've had students that went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's funny because coming back from there, they end up going into areas of technology and things like IT, cybersecurity, and so on and so forth, or they end up going into high-end law enforcement, like either working for the CIA or working for the FBI in some capacity. So it's kind of funny that you take a lot of those men who have had that sort of training, physical training, and so it's sort of like, well, what happens to some of those? Well, they all don't become drug addicts and homeless. Some of them actually go into incredible technological fields, and a lot of those technological fields to use less military men and servicemen and women in combat situations, so that you don't send so many hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of men and women to die for various efforts or competitive efforts, so to speak. So I do kind of see and think that a trend will start to happen, that a lot of these wars will become softer and softer, where it's more about technology versus technology, and whoever comes out on top is sort of like, that's kind of the way to sort of assert that level of dominance, one country over another. And we kind of see it. We kind of see it with China, what China's been doing lately with some of its technological advances, and we see it here in the States, sort of bucking with that, or trying to at least work with that. Like we'll see it in the upcoming metaverse with Facebook turning into the whole metaverse thing. So like a lot of that is going to, that's going to be interesting to see what sort of happens and what kind of competition that creates. Basically turning our society into The Sims, and and you just kind of go from there. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Did you say turning our society into simps?
well, Sims.
No.
but
Sims. All right. Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean,
right.
it's
That's already done.
That's already
we already
happened.
are Sims. That's already been done. So.
Simp enforcers.
so Dr. Thunder. Okay, so the conversation has spread out from that particular point of opportunities in history, and then we went into the whole war thing, and we're like, hey, and all of a sudden everything flipped on its head in terms of now we're just looking at all the good things that tend to come out of human struggle and strife and whatnot. And maybe this is, maybe if it is engineered, then hey, maybe this is maybe this is reaping some of the good aspects of war. The bad sides that we're seeing maybe are not so bad. Maybe the whole cowardice may be a bad side of things for the human spirit, because at least maybe the actual bloody war will bring out more of maybe the bravery, or maybe that's foolhardy romanticism on my part. But anyways, Dr. Thunder, any thoughts as to this, all the good side of this stuff, and is it such a big deal after all? What we may be experiencing right now. And the reason is because you mentioned that thing about your son. Now I want you to go back and say, hey, maybe it's better than him talking about the soup lines in the Great Depression, right?
Right. I mean, ultimately, hey, Game Changer, if I could get you to mute your line, there's a lot of chatter coming out of your feed there.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So Yeah, everything is in every measurable way. Life is better now than it ever has been, even with the pandemic, and that's just facts. I mean, that is true. Um, there are less people in poverty, and there's more support for those that are in poverty. Used to be in the past that if you were poor, then you know there was really no solution for that,
Tough
and
break,
there
nigga.
there was no. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Pretty much that's the way that and forever and ever, amen, you would be poor and all of your descendants. Okay. So we're in actually we enjoy a time in history where at least in the West where there's significant opportunities for folks that were didn't even have their parents in their lives, which would have absolutely been a death knell.
Yeah.
They can actually pull themselves up. Now there's no such thing as actually bootstrapping. You do need actual leverage, and so it's a contradiction in terms. The idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, so you're pushing off of something. So that is true. I think that's just common sense, but. Yeah. So things are better now. Some of the comments about, or some of the commentary about wars and things. So, see, the thing is that change
A time
is
to kill, right? A time to kill and a time to go ahead.
a time to mourn. That's right. A time to love. Well, I tell you the thing about the thing about change. You're always going to have folks that complain about any kind of change, is because people in general are lazy. Gravity is pulling you down, and it takes more energy to fight against the gravity than to just sit there, right? So that's why people tend to complain and don't want to just actually get out there and do something and make it happen, because it's hard for them to overcome the sort of temporary pain that they're going to endure in order to get themselves moving, right? That's because they're lazy, right? So we have this strong tendency to be lazy. I mean, you've seen a baby, right? So we were all babies at one point in time, and as you get older, what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to become less lazy, less selfish, less immature. You're supposed to grow up and be about productivity and all this kind of stuff. But we also know that maybe disproportionately, maybe people stay lazy and unmotivated.
Yeah.
Now, D, understand when I say that babies are lazy, what I mean. Yeah, right. I'm not blaming babies for being lazy. I'm just saying they
Man,
do a lot of
babies are a bunch of
whining.
bums.
Right.
Screw them
They do a
babies.
lot of.
F them kids, man. F them
They
kids.
do a lot of. They do a lot of complaining and whining,
Yeah.
and they expect you to cater to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. So I think, and to quote Pastor Brooks, who I've interviewed on my Conversations with Dr. Thunder series, he would frequently say that when the pain of change is superseded by the pain of staying the same, then you will change. Right. And so a lot of these huge events that we're talking about, wars and rumors of wars and everything else that's going on, that's forcing folks to have to change to survive. And the only reason that they will choose to change is because they won't survive if they don't change.
Mhm.
And so that's why war turns out to be a positive thing, a net positive, with respect to forcing people to change. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
So I'm gonna shout out the super chat right here. Okay. And thank you very much. 9.99. Shout out to Herman Kane again. I9 Bash. Thank you very much. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
you've put my feet to the fire. I'm gonna go ahead and release the track officially. I don't know
Nice.
why. It's just been chilling there, and there's no reason why I haven't released it. I was trying to release it with a couple other things, but maybe I'll just release two of them. I'll release Run
Sure.
and Battle Within, so that you can get them on iTunes and on all those other places, so you can stop doing the
Yeah.
bootleg thing. But
Yeah,
shout out to you. Thank you
because
very much.
this is a great example of the pain of staying the same be,
Well,
being worse than the pain of changing. So you see,
you've held,
the
you got to
bootleg,
hold me
the
accountable.
mention of bootleg that caused a certain kind of pain, and you were like, you know what, I think I'm going to change. So
So
yes,
D is asking who's mad because of my title, but hey, the title. Well, shout out to O'Shea Juke
O'Shea.
Jackson for making the who. Guess who's mad?
Guess who's
It's just a
mad?
way to get you to click on. It's clickbait, D.
Oh man, master,
Sorry to
master
sorry to
clickbait,
break
baby.
it to you, but we
That's
got
right.
you. You were waiting for us to tell you who's mad this whole time, and hey, I guess we were gonna find out if maybe Dr. Thunder was mad, maybe Dr. Doug was mad, maybe Game Changer was mad. We don't know who was mad, but it turns out none of us is really mad. But many things have changed, and I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity to put a last word in here. So overall, okay, with respect to the trends, we're seeing that there's a certain continuity in terms of there's a historical continuity going on here with
Mhm.
regards to, for example, the Pareto principle, which Dr. Thunder mentioned that, hey,
Sure.
okay, something happened and then rich people get richer. Okay,
Mhm.
same thing. That's
Mhm.
what tends to
Mhm.
happen. And then poor
Mhm.
people get screwed, some of us sometimes because of their own ineptitude. And
Mhm.
sometimes because of certain systems, strictures, or whatever it may be, certain
Mhm.
remnants of systems that you mentioned earlier, whereby it will be the case that you and your generations will remain poor to the extent to which that it's still or those constructs are still there in certain societies or whatever it may be, then
Right.
it will continue to happen, right? And then opportunities, many different kinds of opportunities,
Mhm.
up to the point where we took it and we likened it to war. Okay, we likened it to war
Right.
and the kinds of opportunities that come out of that. And
Mhm.
I want to say one thing here, and then we're going to go back. Last words, Dr. Thunder, Dr. Doug, and then um, Game Changer, just a brief wrap up.
maybe
So,
we should start with Game Changer because it seems like he might need to split.
okay, got it. Yeah, we'll go with Game Changer for the last word here. One thing about the, shall we say, the whole Steven Pinker, things are better, violence is down, all those kinds of things. This is true, but we need to remember that the potential, even Dr. Doug was saying the kinds of wars that we'll have, maybe drone wars and that kind of stuff. Maybe, we'll go and fight in space, that kind of thing, right? The Space
Space
Force.
Force. Shout
But
out to the Space Force.
what we need to understand is the potential for catastrophic violence is also through the roof. In other words, it's not going to take, as they said, I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, right?
Mm.
Because after World War III, it's kind of it, right? So
Yeah.
the point is, the potential. It's not going to take too many events, okay,
Mm.
for the thing to disappear. So certain things are going down, but on the other hand, there's potential for massive violence. Just wanted to add that in.
Mhm.
So, final thoughts, Game Changer. What you got for us, and then Dr. Thug, Dr. Thug, Dr. Doug, and
Dr.
Dr.
Tug.
Thunder.
Mhm.
No, just once again, thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate everything. And yeah, I don't think that in a historical standpoint, we're really going to, you know, be thinking about this for too long. I think 100 years from now, this would be the question that children miss on their history exam. what was the CV, is probably like if there was such a thing that affected society in the past. And I'm not talking about the bubonic plague, but I'm talking about just something that's insignificant as or far less significant as this. I don't think that it will have that major impact that society is giving it now. Um, 100 years from now, I think that this is just going to be a blip. Other than that, guys, thanks for having me and greatly appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Game Changer. Until next time. So, Dr. Doug, final
Yeah.
thoughts, sir.
Um, yeah. One of the things that is very a little makes me a little apprehensive about the immediate future, even the distant future, is the potential for major catastrophic events uh, and battles to occur. However, it's almost like I almost liken it to the way that, I mean, we all have evolved to a certain place that I think that we've sort of have learned from the past, um, and hopefully we're not damned to repeat it or rhyme with it at least. But I think that I'd like to just kind of extend the notion of hope that we won't have um, much of uh, catastrophic violent events take place. But again, the potential is always there. I mean, we see what the riots have produced, and we see what some of the angst, even if it's stirred up violence, even if it's stirred up and manufactured, what that angst can do. Hence some of the events around the Capitol. Not even talking about sides or anything, but just the fact that it went there, and people were willing to do that and risk physical health to do that. So yeah, there is a bit of apprehension that I have there, and a bit of caution that I proceed going forth to have. But at the same time, I think that overall we have evolved. Keep in mind, these are small cataclysmic events involving small amounts of people. I don't think that that'll necessarily go away, just because some people are just going to be inclined to deal with that for whatever the circumstances around the actions may be. Some people are just going to be inclined to deal with that. And so, but again, I think that overall people will be uh, smart and about these things, and have a bit of how do you say it, a bit of self-control when it comes to these things. So I think that ultimately, I do see wars being more technological, less physical, a little less physical, but there are still going to be factions that still want to get physical. I'm a big self-defense person, so I just think that the one thing that we all still need to evolve more to is on those of us that are law-abiding citizens to be more assertive and active in our own personal protections, and be smart about our own personal protections as well. And whether that be firearm safety and weapons training, or martial arts training, uh, basic
Hmm.
fighting training. I think that, especially for men, I think that this is something that men should all be pretty adept at to a degree. It doesn't mean you're going to win every physical fight, but I think that it's funny because it used to be state law in China that you had to study the martial arts for a particular period of time, at least through your secondary education, and then after that you can do what you want. So that's why I was always like, are you guys from China know kung fu? And it's like, yeah, a lot of them did at least have the fundamentals together. And so I think that fundamentals of self-defense and things like that, I think going forth, I think those are things to help to quell even some of those smaller factions of violence that can come our way, because you'd be ready for those things, and able to spring into action if you possibly be able to spring into action. Of course, you never know what you're going to do until that situation arrives. Um, but the idea of fundamental training and defense training is to be able to control your emotions as best you can, and control some of the I have a little bit more control over some of the uncontrollables when situations arrive that may spike your adrenaline. and not retreat when there's no way to retreat. And so I think going forth, I think a way to be less violent is to have that capacity, not just for offensive violence, but also defensive violence. And I think it's one of the balances that I think sort of helps to quell certain situations. Again, that doesn't mean that it's 100%, but it definitely gives, even a razor thin margin is better than nothing at all.
100%, 100%. And speaking of law-abiding
Yeah.
citizens, as you mentioned, well, we got the lead attorney here. Whenever you mention law-abiding, I always chuckle a little bit because
Oh yeah.
here's one thing I know.
Yeah.
Never talk to the police, ladies and gentlemen, even if you think you're a law-abiding citizen, because again, I'm going to ask you who drives 55 down the interstate. Do you drive 55 down the interstate? Can you swear? Can you swear on the Bible or whatever, the Quran or whatever you want to swear on that all your tax returns, even if you knowingly or unknowingly that you have not broken some IRS rule? Can you? Anyways, there are all kinds of laws out there that we break. So when people say law-abiding citizen, maybe it's a Nigerian in me goes. I just chuckle a little bit like, ha ha, laws, laws. But shout out to the lead attorney.
That's a great point, man.
You ever wonder why cars are manufactured to go 120? Like, shouldn't that be illegal? Like, when you really think about it, which highway allows you to go 120? Like, that's
just to get away from the police.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey man, I'm putting that super kid on the joint, so my 120 is really like 160.
Right.
So you're really gonna have to work for it.
Indeed. But shout out to the lead attorney again. I'm gonna congratulations for the 100,000 and growing. I think you're already approaching 130K. I'm gonna reach out to you possibly to have a conversation with you, my channel, regarding certain things about protecting oneself and that kind of a balancing thing. You see, us, being someone, because you're a lawyer and some people like myself like to talk about lawyers in a particular way. Okay, no shade to you, lead attorney, but in the business world, we like this. Lawyers prevent things from happening. Okay, it's almost like that's their job. It's like, I got this deal, I got this car order, we're gonna do it. And they're like, well, no, you can't do that. We can't sign that. No, you got to turn it back. We got to red mark this whole contract. And it's like, God, man, I got to make my quota. I got to sell this shit. That kind of stuff. The accountants are like historians. Okay, they say, well, this is the right way to put in the historical data and whatever the, shall we say, acceptable standards of accounting. Accountants are historians. Lawyers are protectors and generally want to prevent things from happening. But lead attorney is also an entrepreneur. You're the lead attorney, right? So there's a kind of a spirit of going out there, conquering things, doing things, taking risk. And how does one balance that with that protective training that one gets from the law is perhaps one particular aspect of something I wanted to talk to you about, but also then we can get into some certain nitty-gritties about protecting oneself when one goes out there to do certain things. It may even be as simple as starting a YouTube channel, right? But anyways, I have some ideas in that regard, and I'll shoot out an email to you. Now, Dr. Thunder, final words. Right. Many things have been said already today, okay, about 2021. You gave us the Pareto principle. Okay, people benefited whom were set up to benefit. And then there was the whole social aspect. In the social aspect, you said, hey, the people who can take advantage of alone time, whom tended to be kind of more introverted types anyways, could do that and they came out better. Okay, and yes, you did talk about the fact that when it got political with the kids and with the boomers and with the fact that the DVOC 91 DVOC is not really affecting the numbers don't make sense in many regards, especially when you compare it to some other things such as Ebola, so on and so forth. And then we ended up with the whole war thing, as in, you know what? Everything, and my quote was, everything about war is good, but for the killing, right? And you be like, what do you mean? I can like, well, everything, all the technological innovations and all the good old cohesion that it makes with the group and people sacrificing and crime rates dropping down, which tends to happen, right? When people get attacked, people unify, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, all that being said, Common
Common.
foe.
Yeah,
Final
yeah, absolutely.
thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Common
we
folk
need we
principle.
need some aliens to attack. Anyways, final thoughts, Dr.
There you go.
Thunder. And let's wrap this up.
Shout out to Independence Day, right?
Yeah, right. Shout out to Will Smith. So yes, and lead attorney.
Shout out.
Good to
Shout
see
out.
you in here. Good to
Yes.
see you in here. Yeah. So I'm going to plug a couple things first, and then I'll get into my final thought. Dr. Doug and I, we do a show on Thursdays on my channel called Thunder's Thoughts with Dr. Doug, or with Dr. Thunder and Dr. Doug, and it's my spicy content, and so we cover a range of pretty edgy kind of topics, and so if you want to check that out, that's a 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show on Thursdays, each Thursday. So please come and check that out. Also, Ike and I will be back here on Ike's channel for our weekly show called Getting Ish Done on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and so that's always a good time. It's a productivity show, and with the emphasis on doing better, right? So that stuff is coming up. Also, this week I'll be beginning again, returning to my interview series, and I've got a number of really great interviews lined up. Be interviewing Melanie King, and I've got a Solomon Jones. I'm just naming a couple things that come to the top of my head right now, but a lot of really good interviews that are coming up, really interesting conversations. So I'll be interested in seeing you support. Please do so. And as far as case closed, we'll be back next week, next Sunday, and that will be 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Sunday. So please come back and check us out. We'll be on a different channel, though, so keep your ear to the ground. We'll make that clear. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great topic. There's been a lot of challenges that we faced in 2021, and there were some things that I do think were game changers. The government, when it takes power, it does not give it back. And even when it's taken with the indication that this is just temporary,
Right.
This is not going to be for, hey, we have to do this. What other solution is there? We must do this. When there's all this urgency, they're never, ever going to give that power back. And I've heard several folks in private conversations intimate to me that this is a sort of dry run. This is they're kind of doing what they're doing to see how much stuff they can get away with, how much power they can accumulate, so that in the future, when they want to see the thing is that you should never argue for the government to get more power, even if they're doing things that you want them to do.
Yeah.
The reason is that eventually someone will be in there that you do not agree with philosophically,
we talk
politically,
about this all the time. Yeah, that's right.
and they're going to use that same power that you rooted for against you and against your own, the issues that you have. And in fact, many of the things that they were able to do in executive orders and stuff like that is because certain precedents were set. right? And
Yeah.
the precedent, and oftentimes the precedent being set by the opposing party,
That's right.
right? And
That's right.
see, now if you look in the Old Testament of the Bible, there's a principle: an eye for an eye, right? Now, understand the reason for an eye for an eye. It was not because the best uh, solution
Hmm.
for someone being blinded is for they themselves to be blinded. It was not
Hmm.
saying this is the best solution. No, it was establishing a standard,
Hmm.
because what humanity's tendency is that if someone takes your eye, you want to take their head,
Right. Right.
right? If
Unequal.
somebody takes your
Yeah.
hand,
An equal
you want
reaction
their
to.
whole
That's
arm.
right. Yeah.
Everything always escalates.
Yep.
It never stays the same.
Hmm.
It always escalates. And so the principle of an eye for an eye is just to say look, there needs to be an equal sense
Right.
of punishment,
An eye for an
right?
eye was the liberal, hippie, kind-hearted solution of the day. Like, hey, you can't just go out wiping out all these whole families because they took your eye.
That's right.
All these blood
That's right.
feuds, blood feuds.
Yeah.
As it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So check this out. What's happening in government
Hmm.
is that they don't have that level-handed kind of thing, right? They don't have that level
Yeah.
solution.
Right.
So what happens is when a particular power is usurped by one by one party, the other party always goes way further with whatever it is.
Hmm.
That's it. It's never like, hey, well, they took a little bit, we're going to just take a little bit now too. No,
Right.
one takes some, and the other one justifies taking way more, and they reference when the other party did something, but their emotions are involved, and in groupthink, mob, the whole mob mentality is
Hmm.
that's in there, and so then they take way more. So you should never ever root for the government to get more power, even if it's for something that you want.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so in that
Nice.
way, I would argue that things have changed,
Mm.
Hmm.
but I'm
So,
not mad about it.
we, guess who's mad? We still haven't found out who's mad. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of things were mentioned, and certain things passed through my mind. Maybe I'll just mention them now. You mentioned the metaverse, Dr. Doug, at some point, and then there was a
Yes.
joke that I saw. Shout out to Plato and Plato's Cave. Uh,
Okay.
Someone talked about, well, what if I own that shadow on the wall in the blockchain in the metaverse?
I think I
You
saw.
get the
Yeah,
picture.
yeah, yeah.
That,
Well,
I was like,
that was that
that's a
was in
good one.
response
It's like,
to there was a couple of, I think it was a couple banking entities that was buying up a lot of the real estate in the metaverse to the point where cats couldn't even go in and purchase because they had already owned it, and they would turn around and trying to sell it back for this like insane amount of money. And so then cats like started coming up with, next thing you know, they're gonna be buying a damn shadow off of it. So it was like turn it into a thing. Yeah, yeah, it was crazy, man. Yeah, the metaverse is already having some issues before it's even off and running. But we'll see how it turns out. I mean, it's exciting to see what happens, but then it's also it's a little bit scary at the same time because again, there's some issues already, and I think what Mr. Zuckerberg failed to realize is that this thing could become something that it's going to be very hard to control. I don't think they realize how tough this thing is going to be to sort of control and quell certain things. And if anything, it's probably
oh,
going
I
to
mean,
exacerbate a lot of the negative things that are associated with Facebook. It's going to be exacerbated in this virtual universe for sure.
that's what it is. Web
Yeah,
1.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0,
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
iterations it continues
yeah,
to
Yeah.
It's going to continue to be this unimaginable beast that comes up. And then
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
mentioned Dr. Thunder, the law
Mhm.
thing, I wanted to
Mhm.
just say this little principle here. So basically, if we were to go to Mars, right? Again, shout out to Plato again, and we're to write the new
Mhm.
Plato's Republic out there in Mars, and we have the blockchain. We'll have laws made with up of smart contracts whereby there will be some kind of a sunset aspect to the laws. Now,
Mm.
there's no reason why you can't do that now, but it's just going to be difficult to do in certain ways. Or maybe you have certain things instituted whereby maybe it takes 60% vote to institute a law, but it takes only
Mhm.
35 to get rid of it, right? So it should be
Mhm.
easier, in other words, to take down the law than to put it up. Will be one other way to put it up. Because basically, no matter what, there is no, if you look at all the game theoretic ways in which things play themselves out, no matter how bad or how many ill, shall we say, negative or unintended consequences come out of a law, you're always going to
Mhm.
have a small group or big group, but it's going to be a powerful group that is going to find a way to carve out their little niche out of that law, right? No matter what that law
Sure.
is, somebody's
Sure.
going to
Sure.
find a way to build a business around it, build a little entity, a little fiefdom, if you will, around it. And then they'll protect it, form special interest groups around it, and that law is not going away. So when it becomes from, again, we're talking about all the game theoretic ways in which these things tend to go wrong. One,
Mhm.
the obvious one is, hey, you give me power, I'm not going to give it away, right? This is the government
Mhm.
itself, right? Why would the government give it away? Bureaucracies also tend to want to proliferate themselves. But another way is this: no matter
Right.
how crazy the law may be, somebody will innovatively think and benefit from it. That's another game theoretic way in which those things tend to go wrong. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let
Yeah.
us now go ahead and wrap this up.
Okay.
Leroy is asking about the content and so on and so forth. Now, generally speaking, there tends to be very little difference between thinking and writing, or thinking and conversing. Uh,
Sure.
Plato seems to be coming up again. Plato's dialogues comes to mind. All
Oh,
right.
there you go.
So
Yeah.
the idea is thinking. Now, is thinking a service? Is thinking I would say overall thinking is a good thing. So therefore,
Mhm.
that is generally what I try to promote over here. Okay, words, thinking, and what have you. And to the degree to which people benefit from that, then there you have it. So that answers that
Sure.
question. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we're gone. Peace.
Take care, everybody.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.